Hello, everybody. This is Carl with Tabletop Tango and Eric. All right. Yeah.
Hello.
Good thing we're using video.
Yes.
And
Eric, waves, acknowledgements. Okay, carry on.
we'll have to put in the subtitles later. So, welcome to what's going to be a new series. I'm pretty excited about it. I think we're calling it kind of tentatively, well, maybe not tentatively, Carl Learns Pathfinder.
2E.
2E, that's right. Not Pathfinder First Edition. That's so old school. Now 2E. So that's kind of cool. I'm pretty excited about it. I don't know a lot about the game. I skimmed it, but boy, learning about it, you can learn as I learn, and Eric's going to teach us all about it. So,
Yeah, let's talk about the concept. So we basically had the idea of Carl was interested in the game, and that kind of as a way to educate others if they want to get into it. It's just kind of walking through Carl as he learns it. So it should be we're not really scripting this that much. It's going to be pretty organic. So, yeah, I mean, both goods and bads with that, but I think it'll be fun.
oh yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So with that in mind, without further wasting people's time, where do we start? Where's the most important place to start if I'm learning the game?
Where do we start? So we're starting with just character creation. This is just about how you go about making a character, kind of quick overview of the options and some very basic concepts. We're not really going to go over that many rules today. But just, yeah, basically an overview of making a character from start to finish.
Which is pretty much the basis of every game, and we did that in Savage Worlds, so now let's do it in Pathfinder. So Pathfinder's got a couple of different things that go into the character. Do you want to explain a little bit? There's ancestry, there's backgrounds, there's class, do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of there's three main components to making a character, and as you said, it's the main one is ancestry, which is their word for race, class, which should be pretty self-explanatory to anybody who plays these type of games, and background, which is just kind of what you did before you picked up adventuring, or in your childhood, or in a young professional career, or even as most of your life, and if you're just getting into adventuring later. So those are kind of the three main components you have to decide on. Pathfinder, now comparing this to the main big game, which will go unnamed, 5e, there's a lot more things to customize, just even from level 1. You just have so much more to customize. So Carl, how did you want to go about this? Did you want to ask any questions first before we got into an overview of the classes and ancestries? Or what kind of did you want to go over first?
Well, so I think you started a little bit with it already. So skimming through it, this is a little bit different than the 5e or the old D&D way where you're rolling 3d6. It kind of starts off with a score, and then all these different things add to those scores, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, in 5e, people can build it in different ways, but just kind of core rules, and you can still do that with this if you wanted to, but the way the core book works, the way the core rules work, is there is no rolling. They're very generous with stat boosts, which I actually have been really liking. I've been playing this since its release, and I played some of the playtests. I've been loving this kind of generosity, and you can still make a flawed character, and we'll talk about that. The way they do something called a level scaling proficiency. So just real quick, all of your skills, everything scales with your level, and then there's just some minor levels of proficiency. There's it goes from untrained to trained, expert, master, and legendary. So there's only about 4 levels there. It's not super complex, like say 1e, but so what I'm saying is that they're very generous with stat boosts, and because they can be, because even if you don't have a negative, if you don't have something, if you don't have a stats in a certain skill and you don't have that skill trained, then you're just so behind. So some people might see the generosity of the stats and be like, oh well, it's just easy. Not at all. Not at all. I mean, it's not Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds is much easier to get away with that. And this, if you are not trained in a skill, you don't have those boosts, and the way crits and crit fails work, which we'll have to talk about in a later episode, every point counts. So yeah, so it's going to be fixed, very fixed. You still have the flexibility to kind of give the scores that you want, but it's fixed at each level. So let's get into this. Any other questions?
No, I think you were hitting on it. It was just there's ability
Okay.
scores, and then there's skills, and then we'll talk about the skills hopefully because there wasn't that many. They fit on a page easy.
There's not a ton,
yeah,
but
so-
yeah, it's definitely comprehensive enough. But yeah, before we get into ability scores, let's just go. Because you're building a character right now, right? Well, let's build you a character. So
I got my
let's
concept.
quickly go over some of the class. Do you want to just quickly go over the classes, and I'll give kind of like a quick overview for people, and maybe we'll list something if they want to skip ahead to the actual mechanics. But real quickly,
Sure,
you
go
got
ahead.
now. So between the classes, there's going to be martial classes, and there's going to be spellcasting classes, and then there's like pretty much one. I call it the outlier. There's one outlier, which is the first one we'll talk about. And one very big important note, and this will come up again later, but I just want to say this now, is that spellcasting classes do not get a class feat at level 1. They have them there because of a human ability that you can get, but just so people know, just right out of the gate, spellcasting classes do not get a class feat, but we'll talk about that more later. Let's start with the weird class. It's the Alchemist. This one is... This one is the one that doesn't kind of fit with the other ones. The Alchemist is all about crafting specifically potions, elixirs, bombs, and alchemical tools and poisons. And when I talk to you about classes too, Carl, most of the classes have kind of subclasses. They call them different things, but they all have like a kind of specialty. Some of them don't change much. They just give you like a small bonus, and some of them change the class hugely.
Okay.
There'll also be certain feats later on that you have to kind of have that subclass with, but this is not like 5e at all. 5e is way bigger than this when it comes to subclasses. 5e, like those are your big subclass abilities. Most of these will give you something up front, and then later on you can take class feats that might have them as a prerequisite, but you can choose not to. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the feats. But yeah, starting with Alchemist, like I said, they're all about making stuff. They're really good for healing. They're really good kind of utility stuff. They have no spell casting. They can be really good. The bombers are really good at like capitalizing on enemy weaknesses. So they're a very diverse thing. And if you're into crafting, which personally I find crafting in this game the weakest part of the game, but they get a lot of things where they can spontaneously create things every day, so you don't actually have to go out and make it. You just get free potions or bombs that you already know. So they have a lot of cool mix of abilities, and you can go a very wide range with them. Let's just move on to Barbarians.
Yep.
Barbarians are one of the big 4 martials, I would say, or big 5. I mean, one of the martials. They're all about hitting super hard. They have their rage mechanic, which they do a lot of extra damage at the expense of their armor and stuff like that. They also get some temporary hit points. So they're all about being big HP pools and hitting really hard. Their subclasses are pretty interesting. Again, we're not going to go super deep into these classes right now. This is just an overview. And they have their own subclasses. Bard is my first class I played in this game. It is a spellcaster, but it's not one of the... There's ones that are kind of more full spellcasting. They get the most slots. Bards get a lot of extra stuff. So there's 4 different types of spell traditions, and this is something that, again, we'll talk about later, that kind of have their own spell list. So not like D&D where a class has a specific spell list. In this game, there's 4 spell lists, and each kind of class uses them or might use a bunch of them depending on your subclass. So Bard is an occult spellcaster, which is kind of like discerning secrets and like gaining lore, and that's their kind of magic. They also have these interesting things called... hold on one second.
Yeah, go ahead, look it up.
I'm spacing out for a second, even though I played them. They have these special cantrips that I will get to in a second that are... God, we'll have to edit this for time, but...
So
I'm
you want me
completely spacing out. I got it. Okay, sorry. Okay. They have... we'll have to... Oh, composition cantrips. Oh, my God. That do, like, a lot of cool stuff. Cantrips are at-will spells. So that's their kind of bonus. They don't have as many spell slots as kind of the main casters, but they get these composition cantrips, which do all this sort of crazy stuff. They also get a lot of different focus spells. Now, focus spells is something that I'll have to talk to you about that a lot of classes get, Carl. And they are separate from normal spellcasting. They are kind of these like almost like there's no short resting in this game compared to 5e. There's only long resting. But if you have focus abilities, if you spend 10 minutes, you can recover a point, one of your points back. And then later on, as you gain levels, you can take abilities that get you more points back. You can have up to 3 focus points at the same time from a focus pool. But basically, they're these like not quite as powerful as like a full spell, but they're these like kind of cool supernaturally abilities that a lot of different classes have, and you kind of always have them if you're able to rest 10 minutes, which you usually are able to.
But they're not like cantrips. They're something different.
They're not cantrips. So cantrips you can do at will. These are kind of separate things. The good thing about them is as with cantrips, they automatically heighten, and heightening is like every 2 levels basically, like every at 3rd level and then at 5th level and every odd level you gain a different spell level, which means like you get access to new spells that are more powerful. But with cantrips and focus spells, they kind of just automatically heighten. And we'll get into detail more of that.
Well, so just real quick, just for a half a second, give an example of a focus spell off the top.
So the bards are really interesting, but they have one that that you can start with that kind of they have these really powerful composition cantrips, and one of them is that it gives +1 attack to everybody in like an 80-foot radius or 60-foot radius, which is actually really powerful in this game. I use it a lot as a bard. They can get a focus spell that basically, instead of 1 round, it can be 3 rounds, which might not seem like a lot, but that actually is really good for action economy, because then you don't have to spend your turn spending one of your actions. And again, this is kind of more into the mechanics, but Pathfinder, there's no like every single turn, and this is going to sound similar to Savage Worlds, you have 3 actions. That's how it works. You have 3 actions, and then different things are difference from Savage Worlds is that certain things have a different, like most spells are 2 actions. An attack is only 1 action. So different things have different amount of actions. So that's like one of the bard abilities. There's also ones that like, can speed people up for a certain amount of rounds, or this is bards, or give people like damage resistance.
Okay.
Actually, those were So there's a lot of cool stuff, or you can counter a spell effect that's like from a sound spell effect or a sight one by performing. So they all the classes have very unique focus spells, and I'll call out some of them as we go through this. So that's the bard. They're kind of a skill monkey, not as much as a rogue, but a lot of cool different abilities, very very supportive, but also good at controlling. Moving on to champion. Champions are kind of the holy warriors. They always have a deity that they follow, and there's good champions and evil champions. They have a special reaction that can kind of help, if they're good, defend people, or if they're bad, do damage based on a reaction. Again, I'm just doing a quick overview. Champions have, along with monks, we'll talk about that, but they have the kind of the best defense proficiency. So certain things you don't choose in this game, they automatically scale. So things like your attack bonus with weapons, or your proficiency with armor. Everything in the game, like I said before, is untrained, trained, expert, master, legendary, and so champions gets the highest armor proficiency. It goes up to legendary, so they're really really good tanks. But they get some other cool stuff too. But they really are there to deal with like supernatural threats and to take hits like that. They start with a focus spell, which is kind of a lay on hands. They do a lot of healing. Just off the base, and that's their focus spell. And they can heal a lot, especially out of combat. So they're the big tanky characters. Moving on to clerics, these are your priests. They use divine spell casting. They only have 2 subclasses, and so all the ones we've talked about so far have subclasses. They only have 2, and these are a little bit more impactful. One's more of your straight caster, and then one's a little bit more martial, not quite as the champion level, but has gets some of those weapon proficiencies earlier and is a little bit more tankier, but doesn't have a good spell casting. So they use the divine casting, they're really good with healing and support and buffing. They can also do a lot of magical damage to stuff like undead or demons, stuff like that. But they really run the gamut because there's evil, there's good. You can use it with any deity.
Right.
Druids are your nature-based caster. They're the cliche primal caster, so they use the primal tradition. So we've talked about 3 so far. They're all about connecting with nature. They get a lot of bonuses to that. Their subclasses are really cool. They get one of them gets a Leshy familiar. So there's familiars like the alchemist could get a familiar. Bards can't, but familiars are really fun in this game. Again, quick overview. They can do a lot of. They get a cool if you choose one of their little subclasses. They get one that's for shapeshifting. So they get a focus spell that automatically heightens their shapeshifting, and then they can take feats later that adds it to it. So they're the best kind of shapeshifters. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with them, but they're a little bit tanky. They're not the full casters yet, just because they get extra stuff. But yeah, they're the kind of nature-based casters, what you would think. Now, moving on to fighters. These are your primary fighters. These are one of the 2 that don't have any subclasses. They just get a ton of feats. So basically, you could have 2 different fighters and they can be totally different because they have so many class feats. And after this, we'll talk about the differences between the feats that I mentioned. But basically, in this game, class feats are everything. Every even level, you'll get to choose a class feat. And then the marshals, like a fighter, get to take one at level 1. So these are kind of how you really customize your character. So they get the highest accuracy in the game. So they're the only class that will end at legendary in weapons, and they're the only one to start at expert. So that basically means they're always kind of +2 ahead of everybody. So they're really good at hitting things. And you can build them all sort of ways. There's a lot of cool styles like two-handed, 2 weapons at a time. There's a really cool style with 1 weapon and 1 freehand. You can do a lot of cool stuff, unarmed stuff, archery, you name it. So you can kind of build however you want with that.
So the fighter is the damage machine to the champion's tanking.
Yeah, and I would say the barbarian's probably better at just straight damage eventually, but the fighter's just really good at hitting things, consistently hitting things, and having a lot of technical prowess. They can do a lot of interesting stuff.
Cool.
Moving on to the investigator. This is one of the new fancy classes from the APG that I have here. And they're actually, at first I didn't think I would like them, and then after I've read through them, they're actually really awesome. They're all about investigating crimes or clues, but they have so much cool stuff once they have an investigation going, they get all these bonuses to anything involved in that investigation. They can even use kind of Sherlock Holmesy, use their intelligence kind of ahead of time to roll to hit, and then if they can decide later, I don't want to use it, or I do want to use it. So they're one of the only ways that you can, that uses a different stat besides strength or dexterity to hit.
Okay.
So they have a lot of cool stuff there. So they're not just the people that just investigate. They also can do some good damage. They're kind of one of these half marshals, like an alchemist and an investigator. Don't get the same progression as a fighter or a barbarian, but they're not like a spellcaster either, if that makes sense. So they're kind of in the middle between those.
Got it.
As far as whenever I talk about that, I'm talking about their when I've talked about trained in weapons, expert in weapons. They get it a little bit later, but not as late as a spellcaster. Moving on to monk. This is the class that I'm playing now, and I'm loving it. I never wanted to play a monk in any other game. These are your classic martial artists. They also don't have any subclasses, but just like the fighter, there's so many feats. There's just so many feats that you want to take as a monk. And while they don't really have a subclass, they have these styles that you can kind of take at level 1, and those are kind of your subclass. You could take more than one style, but and they really range. You can have a pure strength one. You can have ones that are good at grappling. You can have ones that are very mobile. So it really solidifies that feeling of a Eastern fighter and martial arts and kung fu, karate, and all the different forms. They can be key based, so they do have a lot of focus spells too. Something like a key strike where they'll do extra damage, or being able to that kind of wuxia jump around and fly a little bit like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So they have a lot of cool abilities like that, or they can run up waterfalls eventually. There's a lot of cool mobile stuff like that. So they're a lot of fun.
Okay.
Moving on to the Oracle. This is another one of the new classes. These are These are divine. These are spontaneous casters. Now, one thing I didn't bring up to before, and I'll bring up to now, is that there's prepared and spontaneous casters. People from older editions of D&D would know what I'm talking about here. Basically, the prepared ones have to kind of set their spells in the morning, like what spells they want to actually use. Spontaneous casters just have their spells that they have, and they can kind of use them whenever they want. There's a cool mechanic with that is that they can set certain spells to be signature spells. So where in 5e you could have a level 1 spell and always upcast it, you can in this. You'd have to learn it at like 2nd level and 3rd level if you wanted to cast it, even as a spontaneous caster. But you can make a spell of each level a signature spell, and that will automatically do it for you. So you can kind of customize it that way. Now, so oracles are divine spontaneous casters. The clerics are prepared. Their whole thing is that instead of a god, they're connected directly with kind of almost the concept of the divine. Like, so not like a god of war, they're kind of have this very strange and mysterious connection with the warfare as like almost like a spiritual concept. So where the gods get their powers from, they also kind of channel that power. And while this seems cool, they actually have this whole curse mechanic where they start with focus spells, but as they use their focus spells, they have this curse that manifests, which actually will hurt but also help them. It does cool stuff. So an example for this is like there's a fire one, which kind of smoke starts billowing from you and kind of makes you blind to a certain point, but then people are also blind to you, so it's harder for you to hit for you to be hit, and you can kind of see them within that range, but not fine. So it's kind of like a give and take. They have this kind of like that give and take mechanic, and that's their theme. Moving on to a ranger. These are ranger. I don't have to say much about them, but they have a really cool mechanic where kind of similar to the investigator, but more of that tracker base where they can set a hunted foe. And once they've set it, they get kind of bonuses for tracking it and for seeking it. They also get bonuses like their little subclasses are kind of make it combat based where they can hit more or do extra damage. And then they have to set that up ahead of time. They're one of the 2 classes that can get an animal companion if they want. Druid is the other one. And and I guess also I should say champion can get one as a mount, but they also function the same. But rangers get a lot of bonuses, and then they can share it with their animal companion. That's against a specific hunted foe. They're kind of the best at single combat, like 1v1 combat, especially against a boss. And they have a lot of nature abilities as well. They got a lot of new focus spells too in the APG, so you can kind of go this kind of more of like a mystical ranger route if you wanted to. Moving on to the rogue. The rogue is the ultimate skill monkey. Actually, along with the investigator also is a skill monkey. What I mean by that is they get the most skill boosts and skill feats, which we'll talk about later. But out of any of the other people, they get more than the other ones. They also get the classic sneak attack, and one of their subclasses, the thief, is the only way in this game. I know you haven't played a lot of 5e, but they're the only way in this game to actually get dex to damage with melee weapons. So in 5e, you can just use dex to hit and damage as long as it's a finesse weapon. In this game, no. You can use dex to hit, but you still use strength to damage. But the thief rogue is the only way to get dex to damage. So if you really wanted to play a really strong dex-based guy, then the rogue is the way to go. And then, they just have all that classic rogue stuff. I don't need to talk about it. Sure. Now, Sorcerer. Sorcerer is a really cool class. I always love spontaneous charisma casters. So they're a spontaneous charisma caster. And similar to the Oracle is also a spontaneous charisma caster, but only divine. Sorcerers, it's all about some type of connection in your blood. And they are one of the only classes, because I don't think the Witch, which is a new class we'll bring up soon, has it, but sorcerers can actually have any spell list, depending on their bloodline. So that's arcane, occult, divine, and primal. So depending on the bloodline that you've chosen, they can have any of those spell lists. And like I said, each spell list kind of has its own strength and weaknesses. And then also each bloodline gets kind of like some free cantrips. They also get unique focus spells. So each one will have like start with a focus spell, and then you can get more that's related to your bloodline. And then whenever you use a focus spell or one of the spells that it gives you, you get a little bonus, like your blood magic kind of flares up.
So the bloodline. When you talk about bloodline, are we talking about kind of the ancestries you're coming from, or
No,
something
this is
completely
like
different?
so with the sorcerer, you have some type of supernatural bloodline in you. So this can be anything from undead. This can be a demon. This can be an angel. This can be a fae. This can be a dragon. This can be an old, arc wizard from generations past. It's basically your bloodline is suffused with this powerful magic. So all your magic comes from within. It doesn't come from, praying to a god or connecting with some divine essence.
Right.
It's all within your bloodline. So the sorcerer probably has one of the, as far as subclasses goes, along with the oracle, I would say. And the alchemist is pretty strong too, but the sorcerer and the oracle really have the most, it really affects you the most when you chose a specific subclass.
Okay.
So that's the sorcerer. The swashbuckler, this is the third new class introduced in the APG. This is that classic pirate
kind of, yeah.
or Three Musketeers or
Right.
Zorro, or just somebody who not only is kind of a dexterous, charismatic fighter, but they're more than that. They actually have they get panache, which is kind of gives them speed boost and damage boost. And they have these cool things like finishers, and it's kind of when they do a specific skill. So either it's always they can kind of, there's an action called, I forget what it's called now, but it's like jumping through somebody. It's an acrobatics thing. They can get panache, but then each subclass will give you if you demoralize somebody, or if you use a special diplomacy feat, or you grapple somebody. So each subclass kind of gives you a special action, and if you do that well, then you get panache. So they're very much like that. They're a weird one to explain, but they're that kind of deal. Moving on to the witch. This is the fourth one. These in kind of similar to a cleric, but it's more of this, like, not quite a god, but a powerful being is your patron. And they give you like a familiar, and the familiar is a kind of a living spell book and conduit. So you're kind of like getting secrets from a powerful being. One of the patrons that you can get, and they have these themes. They leave it very open to you. Like curse, fate, fervor. But one of them is just Baba Yaga, which, I mean, that's just, it's funny because that's one of them that's just not a specific theme, right? That's just a powerful being.
Right.
But that's from a specific book. But all the other ones are themes. So they use intelligence, and they're, so the only ones besides wizard, they use intelligence, and they are prepared casters, like a wizard. But similar to the sorcerer, they can kind of choose their spell casting depending on the theme that they did. And it's everything. I think it's actually everything. They have primal, occult, divine, and I think they have one arcane. Let me check. Yeah, one arcane. So similar to the sorcerer. Not as much as the sorcerer, but similar to the sorcerer.
Okay.
So they get a lot of cool things called hex cantrips, which are these really powerful single action, kind of like a bard, right? Had these powerful composition cantrips. They have these hex cantrips and hex focus spells. So it's very similar to the bard in that way, but just kind of a different, where a bard is more like, their things are more supporty. They have some debuff stuff. The witch is almost purely debuffing with some support. It's kind of similar to the bard, just kind of a different take on it, I guess, in that way.
Okay.
And then finally, to round it out, we have the wizard. What am I going to say? It's the wizard. They're intelligence-based. They use arcane. They along with the sorcerer, I don't think the witch... Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the sorcerer. And the sorcerer and the wizard get the most spell slots, because all the other spellcasters kind of get something extra. And while the sorcerer and the wizard do get extra stuff, the other ones just have more of that. The wizard is the ultimate prepared caster, and they're want to learn as many spells as they can, similar to the witch. But the wizard can even do more with, like, getting meta magic and getting spells slots back, and there's a lot of cool customization you can do with their schools. Like, they'll get bonus to a specific school. They also have thesis, so there's a lot of cool stuff there. So, and that's that kind of feel.
Okay.
So woo, that was
we
that
got
was a doozy.
16 classes to choose from.
Oh yeah.
So, okay.
We'll have to have some notes here in the video about skipping ahead. Just first of all, any questions? Just overall, anything else to
Well, so
clarify?
I think what's interesting is there's classes that kind of are complementary. So when you if we're looking to put a party together, obviously, the old school D&D, you've got the wizard, cleric, fighter, rogue, and that's kind of, you put them together. So
You don't need that as much here, though.
and that's what you anticipated the question.
Oh,
The question
sorry,
is, does this? Well, thank you. Do we have to worry about something similar in Pathfinder as we're going and building out our party?
I mean, I would say, obviously, to some extent, it also depends on the GM and how combat heavy it is. I would say Pathfinder is probably a little bit deadlier than 5e. There's just a lot more interesting kind of abilities that are going around, and there's more stuff to it. Obviously, you would probably, ideally, you would need like some type of martial person, somebody to take hits. The really cool thing that I like about it, and compared to a lot of other games, is that you don't need magical healing. I mean, it's obviously good to have some magical healing during combat, because dying in this game is much worse than, say, 5e, if we're comparing it. You're just not gonna, you're not gonna have that yo-yo effect in this game. About getting red, going down, going up. Like, you'll just die eventually. That happens two times, and you'll pretty much die.
Okay.
But you can take, because they give you so much more freedom and there's so much more customization outside of your class with kind of the skills that you're proficient in and the skill feats that you take, and even to that, to some extent, ancestry feats and all the other stuff that you can do. There's a lot of good out of combat healing that you can do. So like in the game that I'm in now, the main game that I'm in now, who would have thought the main healer is the barbarian?
Oh, really?
Yeah, he took a special feat called natural healing, which lets you use, and this is just to heal HP. Medicine is still better for recovering from illnesses and all this other stuff. But for just straight healing, he took a special feat that allows him to use nature instead of medicine skill. And he took an archetype, which we'll talk about much later, but basically that gives bonuses to that. So the barbarian is the main healer. It's actually quite funny.
Interesting. That's
yeah,
cool.
so there's a lot more flexibility there, and obviously, having somebody that's sneaky is probably good. But in that game, I'm the monk and I'm the sneaky one. Like, I'm the sneaky rogue. I'm good at pickpocketing. I'm good at sneaking. I'm good at climbing around. I'm also a good fighter. So you don't need the specific classes. You just kind of need somebody, I would say, maybe to fill those roles if you want to be balanced. But, you don't necessarily need those classes. And then Pathfinder also gives you options because of the way multiclassing works, that even if you don't have maybe everything completely balanced out, you can still kind of balance it out that way.
All right, so we got the basis of the class. But, to start off with our character concept, talk a little bit about Ancestries. So those are, pretty much the classic, right?
Yeah, Ancestries the race. But did you have any more questions about the classes specifically, or did you want to get the Ancestries
first?
Well,
I think you're gonna dig a little bit more when I start choosing my class, and we'll start digging into what does that mean. That's what I'm anticipating, because I like the, you got my wheels turning. The 16 classes, I'm already starting to get a feel for. I think I know what I want to be when I grow up. So I'm
okay. Cool. Yeah, I mean, Ancestries I'm not going to get as much into. I mean, we might just list them off. There's some things I want to bring up, though, in this very cool in this game, is that there's kind of the core, there's core Ancestries, and there's ones that are more uncommon, but there's basically the main Ancestries, and then there's things which are called versatile heritages. So when you pick an Ancestry, all the Ancestries, and this is like a race, say elf, all of them have different heritages, which is either kind of like, it's kind of, in 5e you would have like the rock gnome and the forest gnome.
Right.
It's kind of similar to that, but all of them have it, and all of them have several options. And they're not necessarily all like, oh, this is a forest-based one, this is this one. They're kind of just like, well, this is just more like, we'll take an example, like I'll talk about gnomes. Gnomes have a chameleon gnome, which just because something latent magic has diffused them, or fey touched, or sensate. It's less like they were from the specific area and more like they just have different quirks about them. So that's kind of the heritages, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But one thing I wanted to bring up is that there's these things called versatile heritages, and these are ones that are even more kind of mainly supernatural. Kind of, if you think about the sorcerer, they're kind of similar to that. But they're basically things like an Aasimar or a tiefling, so demon, or devil, or an angel, like celestial, divine, or Duskwalker, which is something that's related to the goddess of death, phantasma, something like that, or things like a Dampier, like a half vampire. So those can all be added onto any of the other ancestries. So which is pretty cool. So you can have, a kobold Dampier. You can have a little vampire kobold or a dwarf tiefling. It's very open in that way. The humans have half human heritages, which are
right.
half elf and half orc. But even those can be applied to a lot of the different ones as long as the GM goes about it. So, real quick, we have some, the dwarf. Elf.
Yep.
Elf, gnome, goblin, halfling, human. Then there's the catfolk, hoblin, kobold, leshy. Leshy are like little forest spirits that have kind of gained sentience. Usually druids have risen them, so I want to call that out. Lizard folk, orcs, rat folks, tengus. Tengus are kind of like the Japanese from mythology, like crow people.
Okay.
And then you have the half orc and half elf, and then I said Aasimar, changeling, Dampier, Duskwalker, and tiefling. Aasimars are celestial. Changelings are related to hags. Dampiers are related to vampires. Duskwalkers are related to the goddess of death and psychopomps. And tieflings are related to like demons, devils, and daemons. So I don't know how much you want to get into it. Maybe if you had were kind of, what is this type of race, and I could pick one out for you, or depending on what class, maybe what would be good with that class. I think maybe that would be a good way to go about it.
So I was. I wanted to try to maybe with my character start off with something that's different but not so go with a kind of a half human heritage, like a half elf, which is kind of traditional, but it does represent something a little different as opposed to going tiefling or something a little bit too wide out there. Let's try to stick with something that's a little more mainstream a bit, I guess. So
whatever you want to do. What is a character concept that's mulling around in your mind?
So here's where kind of I'm bouncing, and again I've read briefly. So I'm looking at a half elf who's been an artist all their lives, and then towards later in their life, kind of middle age in a sense, they developed a sorcerer. They developed into a sorcerer.
Something happened to awaken.
Something happened to awaken that, and that's why I asked the question about what bloodlines mean, and we'll have to kind of link that in. And he doesn't quite meet. He doesn't. Again, he's not definitely the classic. Not part of the human society, not part of the elf society. Now, not really part of any society because of this sorcerer kind of vibe that he's got now. And he used to be just a simple artisan. But now he's different.
Cool.
And so
that sounds like a good concept to kind of start building from. I think we should just get into it, right? Unless you have any other questions.
Yeah. So no, I think that's good. So where do we start? We start with ancestries. We start with background. Start with concept.
Yeah, we start with ancestries. Now, since you chose a half elf, now just so you know. You can always do a versatile heritage and just say it's an half elf. So you can start with a human, and say, it's an Aasimar, but they look like a half elf. Just throwing it out there, something like that if you wanted to do, but don't at all.
And so, let's ask the question. You're offering that as an option because.
Well, I was just saying that you could still have the look of the half elf, or still kind of be a half elf, but then maybe that kind of different heritage came out. If you wanted it. Now, what these all do when you add it on, so all of the half elf or Aasimar, you still start with the base human. So you're getting human. Now, if we just take a look at what does an ancestry give you? So an ancestry gives you, it gives you your starting hit points, your size, your speed. Now it gives you ability boosts, and then it gives you languages. Then it might also give you some miscellaneous abilities. Humans don't really get anything else; they kind of just get those things. And then you also choose a heritage. For you, you're choosing half elf, which is your heritage. So you just get low light vision. That's all that gives you. But what it also gives you is access to all the elf feats and a couple of half elf specific feats. So as a half elf, you'll have access to human, elf, and half elf feats. And now when I say feats, I think this is a good time just to quickly break down the three main types of feats in this game, because I think I've talked about them a lot. Now this is the main way that you're customizing character from level 1 to level 20. There's three types of feats. There are ancestry feats, which ancestry feats are ones that are related to your ancestry, your race. These are ones that kind of are from your upbringing or your kind of intrinsic native to your being, from what your heritage, your race, or kind of where you grew up. And these you start with one that you get to choose, as long as it's the heritage that you get to pick, and then at like third level, fifth level, and seventh levels, pretty much every odd level you'll get another one. Most of the time, I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on that, but at least up to 7 and 9, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, then 9 and then. I'm pretty sure it's that way. But so those are ancestry feats. These are kind of cool. They can do anything from giving you, there's a ton of them for each race. It's kind of what you want from them. But these can do anything from like giving you kind of like little bonuses to certain things or extra like skills and lore related to your race. These also can give you weapon proficiencies related to your race. This is a really good way if you're, say, like a spellcaster, if you wanted to kind of have weapons. This is a good way to do it. So there's just a huge amount. Each race is very unique with the stuff they give you. So it'd almost be like, oh, what do you want? And then that would be kind of like what race you look at. So that's the ancestry feats. Moving on to skill feats. Skill feats are related to the skills in the game, and you get them at every even level, and starting at 2. And you also get one for free with your background at 1. Every class gets them at every even level, but investigators and rogues, and to a lesser extent swashbucklers, get them at like every level. So, and what they are basically is that they work with a specific skill, and they kind of give you bonuses to actions within that skill. So, some examples might be like, making within intimidation, like using your strength to be better intimidating, or not having to say anything, not having to speak to intimidate. Or with, say, athletics, being able to grapple things that are way bigger than you, or being able to climb easier, or not take negatives when you're fighting in the water. So there's a lot of things like that. They just kind of make whatever your focus is better. And then moving on to class feats. Class feats are the big feats in this game. Right. Class feats are the most powerful, and they specifically have to do with your class. And you get those at, again, if you're a martial character, you get one at level 1. But then after that, it's just every even level you get a class feat. So first level martial characters, and then every even level. But a cool thing is that this is a call out, people to know, is that humans have an ancestry feat that allows them. It's a level 1 ancestry feat that allows them to take a level 1 class feat. So when you look at the sorcerer, when you look at a lot of these different classes, especially the spellcasting ones, you see they have level 1 feats. It might be confusing, or like, why is that there? Well, that's there because the humans have this special ancestry feat that allows them to take a level 1 class feat. So that's something that you should know as going into this.
So the fact that I'm looking at being a human sorcerer, that means I can take advantage of that.
Yes, if you wanted to.
If I wanted to.
And they don't have maybe the best, it's depending on what you want to do, but they do have some cool ones. But there's a lot of other cool ones to do. So, those are the 3 types of feats. So, so we start with your ancestry. So you want to be a human, you think you want to be a half-elf, right?
Yep, I want to be a half-elf.
Okay, cool. So the first thing you do is, as we're building our characters, you put in all your stuff. So you start with your human. You start with 8 hit points.
Okay, well let me transition to the page. So we can actually bring up a character sheet, and I can type in as we go along. I got to find it, of course. And we'll transition over to that. Okay. All right, so
Okay.
let's start walking through it. So I'm going to be a half-elf sorcerer with the artist background. Okay, let's go. Let's do it.
Okay. So you'll plug in your ancestry hit points, which are 8. Your size medium, your speed's 25.
Size medium, and then what was the other thing? Sorry.
Speed is 25.
I'm trying to find speed on the sheet. I don't know where speed is on the sheet. Okay, well, it's 25. When I see it,
Yeah.
I'll put it in.
I don't have the sheet in front of me. You're using one of the classic.
One that the standard Pathfinder character sheet. Nothing
Okay.
fancy. Oh, there it is. Speed's way down at the bottom. Okay, 25. Got it. All right.
Okay. So now moving on, this is a part that is good to talk about. This is you get two, now humans, along with like half elves and half orcs, start with 2 free ability boosts. Most other ancestries will give you 2 ability boosts, a free one, and a one that's negative. And what do I mean by this? Because this is really important to see. So when you look at ability boosts, it'll tell you let's go to a different one real quick. I'll go to elf. So elves get a ability boost to dexterity and intelligence, and then one that's free, and then they have ability flaw and constitution. So now let's get into attributes.
So so we start somewhere though. I mean, if I remember
all
right, you start at
attributes
10. They start at 10.
Start at 10. Yes, all attributes start at 10, and basically how instead of rolling dice like we said before, these things that you take when you're building your character give you boosts. A boost, when it says a boost, it's a +2 to a stat to one of the attributes.
And then there's a negative too. What do they call the negative? That's
as a flaw. It's an
flaw.
ability flaw, and that's going to be a -2. So like an elf will have a boost to dexterity and intelligence. So they'll start with 12 in those at this stage. They have a free one they can put anywhere. They also have a flaw to constitution. They'll start at 8. Now humans just have 2 free boosts, so you don't have any flaw or anything. Now there's an optional rule in this game called I forget what it's called, but basically it allows you to give yourself flaws to get an extra free boost. It's a variant in the game, and that we might even, it's called a voluntary flaw. It's on page 26 of the core rulebook, right there. This allows you to, say if you take a certain race, like, you want to do an elf fighter, and you really don't want to boost a flaw to constitution, you basically take 2 flaws, and then you get a free boost. Now, in this game, normally, like I said, with an elf gets a boost to dexterity, intelligence, and a free boost, and then a flaw to constitution. At every stage of character creation, you cannot boost the same thing that's already been boosted. So what I mean by that is that as an elf already gets a boost to dexterity, they can't then use that free boost to boost that dexterity to 14. Same thing with flaws. They couldn't take a flaw. You can't take a flaw to something that's already a flaw. With this rule, it's a little different. Is that you can put both of the flaws for this optional flaw rule into something that's already boosted. So say I really don't want intelligence, I could give it 2 flaws. So that intelligence to 10 and then to 8, and then give that extra free boost to make constitution to 10. And then you can use another free boost to make it 12. So I believe that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so for humans, you're saying I have 2 free boosts.
You just have 2 free boosts. Now, there's 4 steps to character creation. As we said before, basically there's the ancestry step.
Yep.
There's going to be your background. There's your class, and then there's free boosts. So each step of those give you boosts to put into your abilities, your attributes, your abilities. And basically, you can, at the max, so a boost is 2 points, right?
Yes.
But
yes.
but starting at level 1, you can only have an 18. It's the highest you can ever get. And then later on, whenever you have a boost and a stat's at 18, it only goes up 1. So boosts below 18 are 2, but once they go Once you get to 18, they're only 1. So at level 5, when you get another boost and you already had one at 18, it would only go to 19.
Okay.
And it's similar to 5e, is that like attributes in this, it's only even levels that matter. As far as like your modifiers, right? So like a 12 is a +1. So it's that way.
Okay,
A 14 is
okay.
a +2. That's the actual modifier that applies to checks. So
Okay, so
yeah.
since
Should I go through quickly the stats or?
I guess go like super quick because I think
Okay.
most people who are watching this probably have heard of these particular stats. So
Yeah. I mean, and like all these stats are tied to skills. So I will kind of leave that out, but very basically, strength's going to affect your 2-hit and your damage. I said most things do damage, melee damage with strength, and including throwing. Throwing is also going to have strength. So this is the main one if you want to hit with weapons. Dex is to hit with weapons that have the spacing out again. That have the finesse property, and it affects stuff like your reflex saves. There's 3 saves in this game: fortitude, reflex, and will. And again, I'm not talking about the skills. This is just the other stuff that it affects. Con it gives you boost to HP. It also affects your fortitude save. Intelligence affects a lot of skills, and basically gives you more skills the higher, and languages the higher that you have it. Wisdom affects certain skills. It also is your will saving throw. And then charisma, is mainly just there for social skills. And then also the spell casting has a certain skill that's related to that. So for you as a sorcerer, your most important skill is charisma.
charisma.
You're going to want that skill as an 18, and you can only have, like, the way it works, you can only have one skill that's going to be at an 18. Ability that's going to be at an 18.
So one of my free buffs, definitely I wanted to put in charisma.
Got to put it into charisma.
Yeah.
Dexterity also affects your AC, so that's something to know. So just depending on what you want to do, you can put that boost in anything else. Dex is always a good one. Con is always a good one. Wisdom isn't always a good one for you. If you wanted to have more like knowledge skills, it just kind of depends on what skills you want to be good at, I guess. Or
Well, considering that this was kind of a artist, performance perhaps. Let's go dexterity. It fits.
okay.
It fits the concept.
And just so you know, I mean, he's an artist. So are you going to be into any crafting at all, or?
Sure, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah.
So crafting is an intelligence-based skill,
All right,
just
well,
so you
then
know.
let's-
But
so
for
we'll
sure,
go-
Dex and Charisma is a really good one to start. So you can just put 12 into those right now.
Okay.
Now, if you wanted to, you could take some flaws and get another boost and another skill, but I don't know if you want to do that.
Let's not for now. Let's just keep going. All right.
And then and also you get low light vision. So you're a half elf, so that's your heritage. So other human ones that you could have taken would have given you different things, but you're a half elf, and half elves gives you low light vision, which is really cool. I mean, it's not dark vision, which is the best one, but low light vision is still cool.
Okay.
So you would put that under the senses part of the document. If you kind of, I believe that's right below in the perception section on the right above skills. There's a little section thing for special senses, and you would put low light vision there.
Yeah, not enough room. We'll abbreviate. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So then the next phase is your background. And again, you don't have to do these all at once, but for building the attributes out is kind of how you do it. So there's a ton of different backgrounds. I mean, I know you already picked one out, but real basically, each background will give you a choice of one of two skills. One of two abilities to boost, and then a free boost. It'll also give you trained at a specific skill. It'll give you a lore skill. Now, lores are like special skills that are kind of like very specific. And all lore stacks with intelligence. but it's kind of like a special thing. Usually GMs will give you like a lower DC or something if it's in your lore. But lore skills are a good way to kind of like get proficient in something that's you don't want maybe the whole skill, but something very specific. And then they also give you a skill feat. So every background gives you those things. You always want to make sure that, obviously you always get a free boost, so you can always take your main ability, but sometimes you want to get like, a 16 and an 18. You have to make sure that like that 16 stat is also one of them in there. So it kind of might restrict you, if that makes sense. Did you have any questions about backgrounds?
Okay, well, yeah. I'd ask you to go over it again, but anybody watching this video can rewind. So let's keep pushing forward. There's a lot that you get from a background. A lot more than when I was skimming that I kind of got the understanding of. So let's go ahead. So why don't you just rattle off a few backgrounds so that somebody has a concept of what it really means, and then we can talk about specifically the one I picked.
Yeah, I mean, these can go anywhere from an acrobat, which could mean you were in a circus or worked on the street performing, or you were like a barrister, a lawyer, or a bounty hunter, or you were just a laborer or a prisoner. You were a prisoner. That's like crazy. So this is anything that was basically something that you practiced, or something that was like happening to you before you kind of became your class.
Right.
Just kind of like what you did as a profession before you kind of became an adventurer. Now, the game has all these general backgrounds. They also have all these, there's always backgrounds related to like adventure paths, or even in their kind of Pathfinder setting. In these books will generally give you, the Lost Omens books will generally give you more backgrounds that are region specific. And I think that's actually in this one mainly. So all the different regions of the kind of the main area, which is the inner sea area, there'll be a lot of backgrounds related to that. So you could say, I'm from this area, and then I have a kind of a background in this. So that's generally what they do. They kind of flesh out your So yeah, any other questions or?
Interesting. Well, let's go look at the background that I've chosen, which is
an artist. So you get dexterity or charisma, and you get 1 free ability boost. That's cool.
And I'm going to take charisma.
Nice, of course. So put that to 14. And what do you want as your free ability boost? Now, we did talk to you about getting some intelligence. Maybe, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Cool.
Yep. Sounds good.
Because what an artist gives you, it actually gives you also, this is the first time, once you put that in, so yeah, put yourself 12 in intelligence. It actually gives you training in the crafting skill.
Skill. Okay.
If you go down to, the little box where the T is, you just kind of click there. If you're in a form fillable one, or just mark it off right now.
Which, say again?
So if you go to the crafting section and you can go over and you see where it says TEML, you kind of want to either click off where the T is.
So T stands for again?
T stands for trained. Now, what does trained do? So normally a skill, if you're not trained at all, you're just going to get your whatever the linked attribute is, so ability. So for crafting, that would be intelligence. So say if you had a 14 in intelligence, you would just have a 2 to crafting. Once you're trained, this is a big deal, you actually get because I said Pathfinder has a level scaling proficiency.
Right.
So starting at level 1, say with that same 14 intelligence, instead of a 2, you would actually have a, 2 for the intelligence, 1 for being a level 1, and then 2 plus 2 for being trained. So that would be a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if I'm correct, right?
You lost me there a little bit. So you get a
2, 4. You be plus 5. So you get your linked ability, you get your level, and you get the training. Like you get a bonus based on how trained you are. So training is 2, expert is 4, master is 6, legendary is 8.
8. Okay. You mentioned
but
that.
Again, it always scales with your level. So even if you just stayed at trains with crafting, at level 5, you would have a +5 to it instead of a +1 at level 1. So just getting that one trained will make it so you're like pretty good. And then as you kind of go in levels, you get better and better. Now with certain things like, like grappling, you're going to want to get that as high as possible. But for something like crafting, if you're just kind of like, fixing a shield, something basic, it's just going to become easier and easier for you. So it's a
Makes
good way to
sense.
get it. So yeah.
Okay. So we got crafting. I checked
You
the
got
box.
crafting.
Yep.
Now, class. Now we'll go back to
Just a murder hobo. Min-maxing on his sheet. She's just a murder hobo. Munchkin in the streets. He's just a murder hobo. It's what his character